And I've entitled it, Stop It. Stop it. Turn to your neighbor and say, stop it.
Stop it.
You know, it's actually continuing in the same vein of what we came out of. I mean, there's just some things that are in my heart this year. And it's getting darker up here. Anyway, so stop it. But again, I love New Year's resolutions. I like to think of the things I want to do and accomplish for the year. And as we concentrated in the last 3 weeks on what God has to, needs a change in us, that He searches us and all this sort of thing, I realized that many times we don't put ourselves in the place to do some things that we know needs to happen because there's certain things in place that we need to just stop doing. Are you with me this morning? Sometimes doing something's as important as stopping doing something. And so I've entitled this series, Stop It, because there's 4 things I want to discuss with you that we need to stop. And so this morning, this first one is, stop making excuses. You're going to love this. You're just going to love it. You know, how do you want to be different? What in your life needs to be different? We've been asking ourselves this the last several weeks. We've been crying out to God, search me, break me, send me, God. But what are some things in your life that you know already that need to be different? And how are you going to go about that change? You know, I think all of us would acknowledge in here. If you're in tune with God, even the least little bit, and even those that aren't would even admit this, how many perfect people do we have in here? Okay. That's what I thought. I'm really glad. I'm really glad we're all on the same page with this one, really. Because if you would raise your hand, yeah, we would have pointed out another problem. But anyway, so I'm really glad that none of us are perfect. So that means all of us need to be different in some way. Are you with me this morning? What is that? What is it that needs to change? And what's keeping you from making that change? As soon as I decide to be different, Satan always gives me all the excuses of why I need to stay the same. I'm reminded of Luke chapter 14, verse 16. And it reads this: a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the same time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, "Come, for everything is now ready." But they all began to make... You guys are following me. I like it when you read this. They're making what again? Say it out loud. Excuses. Excuse number 1. But I just bought a field, and I need to go look at it. How many people buy something before they look at it? It's very rare that we don't check it out first. This is an excuse. I bought a field. I got to go see it. Sorry, can't come. Next excuse. I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I got to check them out. That's like saying, hey, I bought a car, and I got to go test drive it. Again, excuses. The next one's actually a pretty good one. I actually kind of questioned myself on this one. Okay, the first one I can kind of really see the excuse part, but I got married and I can't make it. Then I realize this. How often do we blame our family for the changes that we're not going to make? If my wife would just start doing that, if my kids would stop doing that, if you know what I'm saying? If they would just quit being so angry, if they would respect me, if they would love me, if they would just treat me right, I could make the change that God wants me to make. I mean, if they would just stop it. If he would quit his drinking, if she would quit her yelling, if she, you know what I'm saying? You guys with me? if he would stop watching TV and loafing around all the time, if she would just make dinner, I'd be happy. You know, fill in the blank. Just fill in the blank. Whatever it may be that's you're blaming your family for. You know what blame it does? Blame says, because it's your fault, I don't have to take responsibility for it. So as long as you keep doing that, I don't have to change. And we wonder why we get caught in these patterns that never change. We say, I know God wants me to make this change, but I bought a field. Sorry. I got married. And because I got married even 27 years later, it's all her fault, God. So you guys know it. You laugh. You laugh because it hurts. My dad always said this, I laugh because it keeps me from crying. Yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, I've got a couple of statistics here for you. We all set out in the year, and this is the other reason why I want to be in the same vein. How many people know that at the beginning of the year, so many people set out to do good things and to change, and then stop? I love to work out. You've been around here, I like to run, all those kind of things. You want to know the hardest time for me to work out? It's actually January. Number one, the gym is full. I don't like going when the gym is full. You can call it an excuse, but I actually usually pick up in February. And then number two, it's really cold to run outside. And so those are my excuses. I understand their excuses, but I know the gym's going to be empty on February 1st. I do. And I've got access to everything I need. The pool's emptier. I can swim. The cycle class is empty for the spinning. I know I can get in better. And so I just usually rest in January. 40% of people don't make it past January. 75% are finished in February. We hear God. We say, God, search me. You say, God, find if there's anything offensive. God, how am I supposed to change? And we get all excited about it, and you say, okay, I'm going to do this. And then after a while, the excuses begin to creep in. And we wonder why nothing changes. What does God want different about your life? Number one. Number two, why does God want this to be different? You realize why is very important? When you were a kid and your parents told you to do something, what's the first question you ask? Why? And you laugh because if you've got kids, they're doing it to you now. Why? Why? Do you know what, like Dr. James Dobson even uses this? And I'm going to share with you why it's so important to ask why and answer why. Because when you answer why, you give the person the power to follow with it, and you give them the parameters and the understanding where they go, well, this isn't just a rule now. There's actually a really good reason, and I need to follow this. And it's very important to answer your kids why. And if you don't have a really good reason why, listen to me, parents. Maybe you need to change it. It says, do not embitter your kids. If you don't have a really good reason why, there's a really good chance you're going to embitter them. And they do. So have a good reason why. Pray about it. Guess what? Kids, don't play in the street. Why? Because you're going to get hit and ran over and you're going to be squashed. Oh, okay. See, it's not that hard. So when God tells me I need this to change, He can handle why. In fact, He wants you to ask why. You start out beginning of the year. I need to lose weight. Why? Well, so I can be sexy. No, I actually don't think that's it, okay? Maybe you should ask God why. Oh, because my temple's the Holy Spirit, and I should represent Christ in every area of my life. God says, I want you to manage your money and get out of debt. Why? Oh, so I can buy a boat and buy more stuff. Not that those things are wrong, but maybe stewardship and being able to give and to help the ministry is a bigger answer to why. Find out why God wants to change in your life, and excuses will melt away. Because if it's just to get the vote or just to be sexy, guess what? February's coming. February's here, folks. God wants us to know what? You set out to read the Bible. I'm going to read the Bible this year. I'm going to listen to the Bible this year. I'm going to devote family time this year. Why? Because God wants you to lead your family into understanding who He is and how to have a relationship with Him. God may be saying, I want you to start praying with your wife. Why? Because He wants your relationship to be stronger. He wants you to represent the relationship that Jesus has with the church and how much He unconditionally loves you. Men, why? Because your wife needs to be able to look to you and see Jesus, not you just demand her to respect you like Jesus. Amen? Men, if you don't think you have a men problem, any man that doesn't think he's got a problem has a problem. I'm going to encourage you right now. I mean, there's a few of us men here. There's about half a dozen of us that go on these men's events. It's called The Road, and it's life-changing. Life-changing. Peter's been on it. Rick's been on it. I've been on it. Matt's been on one of it, very, very similar with me before The Road actually came into Michigan. Shane's been on it. Wes has been on it. And he just went out and started pastoring a church. It's life-changing. And we're going to have more this year, and I encourage you to go on them. And you say, well, I don't need that. Well, then you need it. Turn to your neighbor and say, you need it. Well, they got them for ladies, too. Don't think you're out of this. Don't think you're out of it. They're life-changing. Because you need it. I need Jesus. Are you with me? I need Jesus. I'm not perfect. I'll be the first to admit I'm not perfect. So then what are we doing about it? Making an excuse to not change? Or saying I'm ready and willing to open my heart right now and say, God, I've prayed the prayer. Search me. But now that you've pointed out, I'm done making excuses. I'm ready to change. We talked about Moses just a couple of weeks ago. Moses, God comes to him. Here am I, send someone else. But did you notice? We didn't read this part. We're going to continue this. I'm going to build on it, okay? Moses gives these excuses of why he can't go for God. In fact, let's read it. Let's read it. It says, Moses said to the Lord in Exodus chapter 4, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. This is probably true. In fact, most of the time, our excuses are rooted in truth. I could have a lot of excuses to not do some of the things I do. And I do have a lot of excuses for some of the things I don't do. I ran a marathon January 8th. I hurt my back shoveling snow. I didn't get to finish the training. In fact, I got food poisoning on the makeup weekend that I wanted to run and make up some running. I lost like 3.5 weeks of training right before the marathon. I said, I'm not going to run that. And someone on the inside of me came up and said, yeah, but all the Disney characters are there. You've already paid for it. It's on. It's in Orlando for crying out loud. Walk through the drink stations and get your pictures with all of them. So I did. And then I wake up that morning. It was 36 degrees in Orlando with a 28-degree feel. The second coldest day in 20 years. I'm like, I came down here for warmth. I could have had another excuse. Now I'm glad I'm talking to you about one of my successes. I'm kind of hiding the failure moments, okay? Excuses for everything. You want to know something? When you know truly on the inside of your heart what needs to change, and you know that God has told you to change that, and you know why He's told you to change that, excuses have no power. Moses saw was his inabilities. All Moses saw was his lack of power and ability. He did not see God's unlimited power. He did not see God's ability. And this is what God said. He said, who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? In other words, Moses, I want you to think again who you're talking to here. It's kind of like Job. Job, when he's at the very bottom of everything, and God shows up on the scene, and God says, can you catch wind in your hand? Who do you think created Leviathan? Who knows the east from the west? Do you remember who you're talking to here for a minute? You're talking to God. And then he goes on to this. It says this. He says, is anything... Well, actually, Jeremiah said this. Jeremiah said this in 32:26. Is anything too hard for me? God looks at Moses and he says, I will help you, and I will teach you what you have to say. Now go. Now go. Are you hearing me this morning? Do it. There are two ways you can excuse excuses. Yes, it's cheesy. I want you to remember it. I thought of it this morning, actually. There's two ways you can excuse excuses. And the first one is, do what you can do. Take the first step of faith. God said, go, Moses, go. In other words, be obedient. Do you realize when you know what to do and you don't, it's disobedience? Did you know that even if you delay that obedience, that time of delaying is disobedient? We are to be obedient to God. And if God is saying, you need to do this in your life, to not do it is disobedient. It's up to us then to take that first step and say, okay, God, I know I've heard your voice. I trust in you. You will help me. You will teach me what to say, or whatever that help is that you need, because he will empower you to do what he's asked you to do. Take the step of faith and do it. You know what I found about working out? When I go on a spell January and I don't work out, it's really hard to actually go in February. It happens every year. And you want to know the first thing I do to convince myself to start again? Just show up. It's the hardest thing. I don't even care what I do. I just show up. I'm gonna run 1 mile. Doesn't matter. It makes no difference, because once I start the habit of showing up, then everything falls into place and everything starts to click, and then I begin to do what I know I'm supposed to do. Just show up. Just go. Just put one step in front of the other. Do it. What do you have to lose anyways? If he says you need to eat better, throw your Twinkies away. If he says quit smoking, throw your ciggies away. If you have to, bring them and put them in the offering plate. Give them back to God. Don't put the Twinkies in there. I'll be tempted with those. He says, put your finances in order, start a budget. He says, get your marriage in order, get counseling. I've gone a long time already. John 15:5 says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So this is kind of almost a contradiction to go and do, except for one thing. We can't do anything without Jesus Christ. So the first step is only a step of faith that says, God, I completely trust you. I'm waiting on you. And I'm going to explain to you what waiting on God is. Can I explain to you what waiting on God is? Have you ever gone to a restaurant and the waiter said, go get your own food? Waiting on God is serving Jesus, stepping out on faith, and going and doing it which is point 2. Trust in God to do what you cannot do. He told Moses, he said, Moses, I will teach you what to say. I will put in there. And then he sends Aaron with him, and he helps him. God's desire is that we change properly. God's desire is we change in the image of His Son. God's desire is that we don't stay in sin, that we don't stay in a rut, that we don't just go through life wondering why marriage sucks, why kids suck, why job sucks, and everything else. Can I be blunt with you? And you go through life a little bit and you go, how come life is like this? And I wish it would just change. Well, there comes a point where you have to hear God say, God, search my heart, change my life, and I'm going to quit making excuses, and I'm going to step out on faith and listen to you, and I'm going to do it. I follow you this morning. Just do it. You say, but I can't. That's why you need Jesus. It says remain in Him. You know the word remain there means? I'm going to kind of wrap things up so you don't have to follow me. Remain basically means to be in God's presence and to wait on Him. And that waiting on Him, I'm going to tell you again, is to serve Him, listening to Him, allowing Him to guide you, resting in His strength, saying, okay, God, when I step out on faith, I know you're going to be there. You have to do it. You just have to do it. It's that simple. That's what faith is, folks. The word remain there is a verb. It's an action word. Faith is an action word. It isn't, I'm just going to wait till God does. I'm going to wait till the waiter's over there. I'm just going to wait till they get up and get the food themselves. I'm going to get up. I'm going to wait on God. And I'm going to see what He's going to do in my life. I'm going to watch Him change me. And you're going to watch Him change. Maybe you're sitting here this morning and you're saying, Pastor Dan, I do not know for certain that if I were to die tonight, I would spend eternity in heaven. You may have a lot of excuses why you've never raised your hand. You may have a lot of them. I'm here to tell you this morning, today's the day to stop making excuses and say, I want to accept Jesus. If that's you this morning, I'm not going to call you up or embarrass you. See, I removed 2 excuses right there. Just slip up your hand. Is there anybody here at all? Anyone here at all? Father, I thank you. I thank you for your Son, Jesus. I thank you for His power in our lives. His power in our lives to change. His grace that gives us the ability to even follow you and to be changed. God, I pray that grace will be so evident in our lives that this year would be a big year, that our families would be made whole, that our marriages would be made whole, that the issues that we're facing that need to be changed would be changed, and that as you begin to show us in our hearts and in our life that needs to change, we will see your power in our lives to change it. And thank you, Father, in Jesus' name.